Welcome back, everybody. I've got here a beautiful whitetail buck harvested in Manitoba, and I'm gonna show you how to remove the front shoulder, and not only remove the front shoulder, but how to get all of the great cuts of meat off of it. So although taking apart a deer may seem complicated if you haven't done it before, or if you've watched someone else do it, but it really isn't. You're just following seams of meat. So I'm gonna show you how to lift this leg up, start removing the meat. There is no shoulder joint here. It's just a big old flat bone that comes and removes right off the side of the rib cage. So it's a pretty simple process. I'm gonna show you how to do that confidently and really quickly. All right, so the way I'm gonna start this is by lifting the leg up and opening it up and start cutting away the connective tissue and the muscle groups that are attached to the chest, and it'll start freeing up this leg. So I'll just start making some cuts along those seams, and you'll see that this leg wants to start lifting up and removing from the side of the body. So the shoulder's an interesting cut because there's a bunch of neck meat that wants to connect to it and some of this meat that is on the back as well. This isn't really much of an issue if you need to cut through it. So once you get underneath and you start noticing that the leg is separating from the body, you can start cutting through some of this meat that is connected to the neck, which you see is removed already here, and just lift up, and you want to get to the top of this shoulder blade. So that shoulder blade comes and almost connects to the top of the spine here. So you can even go at the top of the spine with a cut, and it's a bit of a half moon shape that you're going for here, but you just want to remove this thin, or at least score the thin layer of meat here, and you can start to feel the shoulder blade connect where it's connected to the top of the spine here. And you're just gonna make one sweeping cut, and there it is right there, a fully removed front shoulder. What I did was I just removed some of that thinner skin and stuff that was the connective tissue, connecting everything to the shoulder and to the neck. So we've got a really clean front shoulder now. And what this shoulder is made up of is just a few main cuts. So we've got our shank here, and then we've got this mid cut here off the humerus bone. A lot of people refer to that as the mid roast. And then we've got the blade on the top, and the blade has a couple of cuts on it as well. And I'll show you how to break those all down. So we're gonna start with the shank, and all I'm gonna do is, you'll see here that there's a joint that connects this humerus to the shank bone. We'll separate the shank from the rest of the shoulder right now. So all I'm gonna do is get under the shank on the back side. I'm just gonna make a clean cut down, making sure that I'm missing the meat on the back side of the shank here. I'm just gonna cut down right to that joint, and you'll see that that joint now is a lot more free. Then I'm just gonna do the same thing on the top side. And there's a little bit of a kneecap that you'll see that comes up on the front side of it. So I wanna make sure that I get on top of that with my knife, just get behind it and cut down into that joint as well. And you'll start to feel that that joint now is extremely loose. And all you're doing is getting in there. There's a little ball that you need to remove, cut all the meat around it, and it should just pop out. You can usually just give that a quick little snap, and you'll see that we've got the joint opened up. And once you feel that pop, you can just go in there with your knife and remove the rest of the tissue, and it should come off really nice and clean. There it is there. So the bottom of the humerus bone and the shank is completely removed. So all I'm gonna do is, you can see that there's a line here that goes from where the blade is attached. The blade comes all the way down. It's sort of shaped like a V downward where it connects to the humerus. So I'm just gonna take my knife and cut along that line and bring it all the way down till I feel the humerus bone. And we're gonna bring it to where we feel the joint, which is right where that elbow sort of is. So I'm just gonna work on the top side of that as well, right where there's a nice, really defined arch in the top of that kneecap. Just gonna make a cut. So there we go, again, just working around the joints, making sure we're removing connective tissue. We've got the blade now removed from the mid-roast. So we've got the mid-roast. I'm just gonna put that aside over here by the shank. All right, so now for our blade. The blade has two main cuts on it, on the top side, and on the back, there's just some meat that we wanna make sure that we remove. That'll be really good for turning into stew or throwing into the ground pile as well. But we've got this really nice, beautiful steak that's on the front. And what you need to do is identify where there's this bone. You can actually feel it with your hands, but there's two sections to this blade. Now, it's a flat piece of bone with this ridge that sticks up along the backside. So all you want to do is run your knife along the outside of it, and you can just cut along that bone down to the bottom until you feel it stop. You really only need to go down about 1/4 of an inch, and near the back, you can feel that it's a little bit deeper. And as you're doing that, and you start to hit the bottom of that bone, you want to twist your knife outward a little bit so you can shave the meat off of the flat part of that bone. So as I'm doing it, I'm just sort of peeling the meat away from me as I'm finding where the flat part of that blade starts to even out. So I'm just gonna flip this around and look at it from the backside now. And what you can see is that there's a little bit of a seam here. And all I need to do is, because I've already peeled the meat back away from the blade on the front side, I'm just gonna take my knife and run it through along that seam, and it'll help pull this piece of meat off real easily. Follow that out, and now we've got that really awesome piece of meat. Trim up the silver skin and use it as steak. It's a really great piece for that. So I'm just gonna put that off to the side, and we're gonna start on the flat iron. So the same thing, that ridge bone that follows along the outside of that blade, I'm just gonna bring the knife to the other side of it now and cut down deep until I feel the bottom of the blade, until it flattens out. And we're just gonna do the same thing as we go along. We're gonna follow along the bone, go down until we feel our blade stop. And now we're just going to scoop that meat off of that flat part of the blade as well. So what I like to do when I get to this part is the top of the blade here, which is the most round and flat part. This is where the meat starts to flatten out. And you can see that it tapers down here as well. So I kind of use my knife to guide along there and get that as my starting point when I'm starting to flatten out my knife to fillet the last bit of meat off here. So again, use that bone as your guide to just push the tip of your knife along into the edge of the bone. And as you do that, keep on peeling away the meat with your thumb, and you'll see that this whole piece will just start to come off. So I'm just gonna work my way along the bone until I have everything disconnected here. So during that filleting process there, you're gonna realize that you'll run out of bone to cut across, and that's just perfect. That means you're at the end of the cut. So I'm just gonna take my knife and run it along the edge of that bone, following that V, and that's gonna help me define where this cut ends. So I'm just gonna go all the way through with my knife to finish off that cut, and there it is. That is the flat iron removed from the shoulder blade. And most of this meat will be perfect for the ground pile. So there we have it, our 4 main cuts off of the front shoulder. We've got the shank, this great mid-roast piece, the mock tender is what it's sometimes called, and our flat iron. So these are 2 really good steak pieces of meat, and these are 2 really good slower cooked pieces of meat. So we can either do ground or a stewing meat with this one. Great with the shank as well. And there we have it, all of the meat off of a front shoulder of a whitetail. So in the future, I'm gonna show you how to make unique recipes with each one of these cuts. And for more information on deboning the front shoulder of a whitetail, check out the blog post link below.